What's up, everybody? Welcome to Podcast Now. I'm Alex, and in this video, I want to re-review and talk about Scream 2. I just saw it last night. Technically, I didn't just, walk out of the theater for the 25th anniversary showing. So, I also noticed some things, and I do want to make that kind of a point. I'm sure this knowledge, this newfound knowledge that I have claimed is going to come in handy when it comes to the trailer, and then Scream 6, or also, I guess, Scream 2 releasing. Maybe I'll be able to kind of spot some things, especially if they really are laser focusing on mimicking in a sense Scream 2. So I do want to bring that up, but I think that knowledge is probably going to become more useful as the time goes on. Really fast, one more shout out to my wife's shop. Let me show you the Ghostface cup there, a little bit closer, a little bit better of an angle there, huh? The link is in the description below if you guys want to check it out. They're Ghostface cups. You can get them there with support, I guess technically the channel as well. Supports my wife. I think she did a really, really good job. Cool Halloween gift and all that. So yeah, links in the description if you guys want to check that out. Now, as for Scream 2, to be honest with you, Scream 2 has always kind of gone back and forth for my second favorite, along with Scream 4. I can't, in good conscience, put Scream 3 anywhere. To be honest with you, and I've said this before, Scream 3 is the weakest one by a lot, in my opinion. It's got some of the strongest moments in any Scream movie, but consistently throughout the movie, it's the weakest, at least in my opinion. Scream 4, like I said, is pretty darn good. I would put it with Scream 2. And then Scream 5, again, I would say Scream 3 is probably last, and then Scream 5 would be, above that. But really, I can't, again, in good faith, put 5 above 4 and 2. But 4 and 2 have always been kind of tied to me. On some days, one is better than the other. And I guess I'll have to rewatch, this year. I kind of watch it yearly, Scream 4. But seeing Scream 2 in theaters really elevated it to me. I mean, obviously, it's probably something with seeing it on the big screen, hearing it just a little bit louder, then you can get on, I guess, your television. But no, I really think it's a really well done movie. I was kind of critically analyzing it. I feel like I'm probably being like too tough in my head, like looking at, I don't know. I was really, I guess, looking at how the movie frames every single character. Who's in this movie a lot? Who's in it a little? Who's the focus on? Obviously you can look at like the character arcs, and there's comedy, and there's the meta-ness, and I really think Scream 2 does so much of it really, really well. And I can't obviously put myself back there because I was half a year old when 1 came out. I guess I was 1.5 when 2 came out. I can't put myself back there, but and I'm not also, and I've said this before, I'm not really a horror guy. I don't really watch, many. I've watched some, and I do know the general idea with a lot of horror movies is they get, weaker as they go along. Obviously, this movie does the rift of, sequels to these things kind of fail, or sequels in general. Like there's normally not very many of them that end up being better, and this is not even close, in my opinion, to being better than the original. But in terms of like the production and the scale to it, it's extremely good, but it keeps a lot of the same principles. So, what I mean? It expands in the ways that it needs to. It expands in a way that a sequel is kind of bigger and better in those kind of, ways. But also it does stay really good. The chase scenes are awesome in this movie, right? And we've talked about that before. Something that was, really missing from Scream 5. Just some really long chase scenes. The characters are all extremely good from, again, you have the core cast, right? But then you also have a lot of the newcomers, and the newcomers, like Derek, is an awesome, awesome character. I think he plays that role very, very well. Obviously, like a Mickey is very good, very not in the movie, right? Debbie Salt, incredibly good. I mean, there's just really Joel, all these characters are very good characters. There really isn't, I would consider, a weak character in this movie that has like substantial screen time. Obviously, Sarah Michelle Gellar as Cece, right? She does awesome. I mean, she's in 2 scenes, right? So you can't judge too hard, but she's incredible. So the movie, I think, does everything kind of it needs to do. I've always focused on like the beginning and ending of the movie. I will say, I think seeing it in a theater makes it's a theater. It's not the same theater, right? But having like the theater ending, I feel like it actually helps. It is obviously, again, like a much bigger, it's like a grand kind of thing, the ending. And it's very different in a way than, Scream 1. Now, they can never truly replicate Scream 1, and they're not trying to. I do like certain elements of Scream 1 more in terms of the ending, in that, like, so she's kind of like trapped with Scream 1, right? Like she sees kind of not like freedom, but she sees like a positive in Billy being alive, almost like a protector, and then turns and she's literally stuck in this situation that she tries to leave. For this one, she literally has to get to the location. That's always been a negative I've pointed out. Obviously, these movies they try to be smarter than most, and this movie is. This movie overwhelmingly is a very smart film, but there are still some reaches that this movie does to make it work, and I'm not the biggest fan, including, and I think maybe one of, if not the biggest one, being, if the car didn't crash, like how did all that stuff work in Mickey's head? Where was he supposed to take her? I assume he was supposed to take her to the theater in the first place, but it just coincidentally happened where she walked her way right back to it. But he still beat her to it, I suppose. So that, I guess that makes sense. Maybe not. And so she had to like walk herself into that situation, and she was able to get out of it. She just kind of chose not to, kind of chose to accept like this is where the final part of the movie is gonna, be, right? So like that was a weakness. Obviously, like the killing Randy thing has been a 25-year debate if that was the right move. It wasn't the right move to kill him. I get it at the time. I still get it now. Like you pretty much did need one of those four to die, and that's the case that one of them had to go, and he was the one. And I guess if you would have killed any of the others, and I mean you did do the Dewey thing, right? Again, so that kind of brings me to some of my things that I noticed in this film, right? That I really could imagine them doing something like this in Scream 6 or I guess Scream 2. So Cotton is somebody that I didn't really think of too much as like a huge personality in this movie, but he actually is pretty gigantic. And I guess in terms of like the character focus, which I talked about in the beginning, one of the interesting things I thought was they put the focus on so many potential characters that could be it. And I would say for most of the movie, because it really doesn't get going until like Cece dies, and then even after that though, really Randy is the thing that kind of like kicks it off. This movie actually has a lot of building to it and has a lot of explaining itself that it needs to do and kind of catching up, and then it kind of it gets pretty extreme towards the end. So with doing that, I actually like that. I actually really like that because you have a large cast of characters and you're not really eliminating any, so they're all still targets. Like once Haley dies, the list is obviously a lot lower. I guess once Dewey's taken out, right? Well, kind of taken out, right? The list is very, very small of who it could be. Obviously, like Cotton is a big, thought, but also then you think, well, Mickey does exist in this movie, even though he's barely in it, right? So he's probably it. Debbie Salt, I mean, maybe you think of, maybe you don't. Here's the thing with her. Obviously, one of the main aspects we always talk about, and of course it is different watching it now, having watched it a few times already and knowing about it, so you have to view it differently, right? But she is in the movie more than I think we kind of give her credit for, right? We talk about how she's like this background character that appears in just like a couple scenes for a few seconds and she disappears and the eyes really aren't on her. I mean, if you think about the cast of this movie, she is in the movie. She's actually, I would argue, she's in the movie more than Mickey is, because she does pop up every so often, has a couple lines, has some sort of like persona about her, and then pieces out. So she is in the film, honestly, very similar in length and I guess structure to Mickey. They're really background characters, and I think they're background characters on purpose. So in terms of what I noticed, it's kind of that. In this movie, more than I would imagine, I mean, I have to rewatch all the others, which I will do, but they really focus on the red herrings a ton. And in my opinion, it's kind of to make you think that it's one of them, so you're not even thinking about the characters you haven't seen much of. Honestly, like even like a Joel character or like like some of these characters really could still technically be it. There's even thought, obviously in the movie, that like Randy or Dewey, like Dewey comes off pretty sketchy for the first, I don't know, like 40, 50 minutes of this movie, where, again, like watching it back in 97, after watching Scream 1, like, is it possible that Dewey or Randy could be a killer? Yeah, it kind of was back then. Like, that argument is really bad now. Like, Sydney's Ghostface, right? Like, that's a really bad argument to make now, 25 years later, 5 movies later, really bad. But back then, When you only did the one, you're going to the sequel, you have characters calling each other out, like Randy and Randy calls out Mickey, to Dewey, but then also you have the Mickey, Derek and Haley group that calls out Randy, or technically Mickey does, right? So it does kind of say, well, Randy could do it, Dewey could do it. So even characters you already know, I guess even Gail was briefly thrown in. I don't think really there was ever any eyes on her, but the point is, even in the core four, you could say, that entered that film, Randy and Dewey were somewhat light suspects through half the film, you could argue. And then beyond them, you have characters like Cotton, who's like just so there as, okay, you cannot count him out. You also can't count Derek out because he's and even the music cues, I realized, and I really don't think I even could pick this up unless I was in a theater, the music changes that happens during some of the Derek scenes is very interesting, that it basically turns into like kind of shock sounds, or like more like the darker kind of tones. It really does, I think, make you feel, or the music is trying to tell you, like, watch out for this guy, right? So these characters are there and they're present, and because they're so present and because they're so like in the front of the screen, I feel like the movie wants you to forget, because watching it again, it's like, all right, well, I am kind of distracted by how obvious some of these people seem, but you also haven't shown me Mickey and mainly Mickey, right? You haven't shown me him, so it's like, well, I actually have eyes quite on him, and he seems very believable that he could be the killer. So there was that aspect of it. I thought that to me, that could be something that I'm going to keep a very, besides like fake out deaths with like a Dewey, or like the structure of how they did the kills, things like that. Really fast in terms of one negative that I noticed as well. The use of Roger L. Jackson, throughout the films, he's incredible, and he's one of obviously the shining stars in a film franchise that is routinely good. But he's like very little in this movie. The Randy call is like the longest thing he has. I'm trying to think even of like which scenes. You technically hear him in the very beginning because of Stab. I don't really like to count that. And then after, there's like the prank call with Sydney. There's the call to Sydney. None of those are, meaty. The CC one is very good. The Randy one is fantastic. And is that it? Like, I feel like that was honestly, I'm pretty sure that's the only, or that's the last time that you hear him. So he's just not in this film all that often. Like Ghostface is, right? But the voice isn't as much. And then in 3, they play with his voice so much that was, to me, very annoying. And then 4 and 5, I think, really got back to some of the structure and some of the better stuff. So I actually never really thought of that as a negative. I've never been too into the movie theater opening. I don't think it's bad. I just don't think it's like spectacular, but there was that as well. But really, I would argue, besides like the lack of the voice, maybe the opening and maybe some of the, I would say, reaches to get characters in certain locations or to get things in certain places just in general. Besides those, this movie is super, super good. And I would say if we got, I don't want a copycat. I do not want 6 to copycat 2. But if we got something similar in quality to 2, which really is a bigger and better in terms of like production and effects, and the sets are bigger and there's more characters and there's more things going on. If that's what bigger and better means, I'm all for that. And I do think, based on everything we know about 6, it's going to be that. It is going to be a bigger movie in every single way. Now, are they normally better than the other ones? No. The issue here, or not even an issue, actually somewhat of a positive, is 5 is nowhere near as strong as 1. So like 2 was following a very strong 1, 6 is following not as strong 5. So even though 6 is going to become, bigger and all that stuff and raising the stakes and all that, I do think it has a much better odd of being better than 5 than 2 did, having, been better than 1. There are some people that like 2 more than 1. I can't say I'm one of them. I think pretty much if you go through like every element, like I do think the character list is very good, and I think there's so many really, really good characters. I don't know though if they can beat like who matches up in quality to Stu and Billy, and like Sydney's a better character in 1 than she is in 2, but Gail is a better character in 2 than but Dewey's better in 1. So it's tough. I can't get there. I guess I get it, or I would understand. I respect it. We'll just land on the respect part. I respect people with differences of opinions. I just can't get there. I can't get there. But I do think, because 5 is not as strong as 1, that 6 could potentially be really good. So we'll see how it goes. But let me know what you guys think about Scream 2. Again, this is kind of fresh in my mind since I just watched it last night, but we'll do more videos like this. And like I said, this kind of knowledge, the structure of what they did in Scream 2 97, we'll try to bring that back, or I'll try to bring it back for when they do, Scream 6, and we'll see if I can get everything right like we did for, for Scream 5, which was kind of annoying in a sense. But let me know what you guys think. Make sure, again, you guys get the Ghostface cup on the website in the description below. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you all on the next one.